If you've got a family trust, you've probably worked out by now that the budget is pushing you towards a company. And to soften the blow, the government has offered 3 years of rollover relief so you can move without getting hit with a capital gains tax bill. So far, so good. But there's a second cost sitting under all of this that they didn't mention. And depending on what's in your trust and what state you're in, it can run into 6 figures. I'm in Perth, and I want to show you why that cost is worse here than almost anywhere else in the country. Let me start with the good news, because the rollover relief is genuinely useful. From 1 July 2027, you get a 3-year window to move assets out of a discretionary trust and into a company without triggering capital gains tax event. Normally, if you shifted a business or an investment out of a trust, the tax office would treat it as a sale and tax the gain, which for a lot of people would be enough to kill the idea completely. The rollover switches that off so you can restructure without a tax bill that would usually come with it. But here's the part that catches people out. That relief is federal and it stops dead at the federal border. The Commonwealth can waive away its own capital gains tax, but it can't touch what the states charge. And that's where the hidden cost lives. So when you move your business or property out of a trust and into a company, the state you're in treats that as a transfer of assets and charges transfer duty, otherwise known as stamp duty. This is the bit that nobody's talking about, because everyone's heard rollover relief and assumed the whole move was free. It isn't. And how big that bill gets comes down almost entirely to one thing: where your business is. Here's why that matters so much if you're in WA like me. In most people's heads, transfer duty is a tax on property, so they assume that if there's no real estate in the trust, there's nothing to worry about. That's true in some states, but it isn't true here, because in Western Australia, duty is charged on more than just land. It charges duty on your business assets too. And that includes the goodwill of the business, the name, the identity, the client list, and the plant and equipment when it moves with everything else. So picture a typical services business in Perth restructuring out of its trust and into a company. It isn't just paying duty on the premises it owns, it's potentially paying duty on the goodwill, which for an established business can be the single biggest number on the balance sheet, plus the equipment on top. The base the duty gets charged on is much wider here than people expect, and so the bill is going to be much bigger too. And the frustrating part is that this was meant to be tidied up years ago. When GST came in, the states were supposed to wind back many of these business duties, and some did. WA largely didn't, so we're still sitting with one of the broadest duty bases in the country. Queensland charges duty on a wide base too, much like us. But Queensland actually brought in a small business restructure exemption. So if you're under 5 mil in turnover and the business assets are under 10 mil, you can move from a discretionary trust into a company and have the duty waived, as long as the ownership lines up the same way on the other side. So a Brisbane business doing exactly what the budget is pushing them to do can often get out of their trust without any duty at all. Over here in WA, there's no equivalent. We've got the family farm exemption and a few narrow concessions, but there's nothing that lets an ordinary small business roll out of a trust and into a company duty-free. So the same federal change is landing on a Perth business and a Brisbane business in completely different ways, and the only difference between them is the state they operate in. I'm not the only one saying this either. A senior tax specialist has already written to the WA Treasurer warning that without a transfer duty rollover, thousands of WA businesses are going to get hit with these costs purely because of the federal trust changes. Now, I don't want you to hear all this and conclude that you should never move, because sometimes the duty is absolutely worth wearing. I had a client whose trust had built up a Division 7A loan problem worth over $1 million. And the cleanest way to fix it was to move the business out of the trust and into the company, with the trust becoming the shareholder. We used the small business rollover to do it, and the transfer duty on that came to around $40,000, which is not a small amount to write a check for. But that restructuring saved the client roughly $500,000 in tax savings over time. So 40 grand to save $500,000 was an easy decision once you saw the whole picture. That's the real lesson here. The duty isn't a reason to never restructure, and it isn't something to ignore either. It's a number you have to put on the table next to the tax savings so you can see whether the move actually pays for itself for you. So here's how I'd approach it if you're sitting in a trust right now. First, don't rush. The rollover window doesn't even open until July 2027, and you've got 3 years from there. So there's no prize for moving early and every reason to get it right. Use that time to map out your transfer duty exposure before you shift a single asset, because the worst outcome is restructuring in a panic and finding the duty bill afterwards. Second, keep an eye on the states. The pressure on WA to bring the rollover is already there. And if it comes, waiting could save you the entire duty bill. That's a genuine reason to plan now, but hold off pulling the trigger. And third, weigh it asset by asset. For some things, the tax savings from getting out of the trust will dwarf the duty, like the client I mentioned earlier. For others, the duty cost of moving might be more than the 30% trust tax would ever cost you, so the asset is better left where it is. There's no single answer that's right for everyone, which is exactly why you map it out before you move. And if you want to see how a high profit business can avoid paying 47% tax and then pay no tax at all when the business sells, watch this video next.